Campi Flegrei in Italy. And I start with a quote of a study that has been, amongst others, made by the director of the Vesuvius Observatory and the INGV, the Italian Institute of Geophysics and Volcanology. And this is the institute that monitors Campi Flegrei and Vesuvius locally there. They're right there. And he's the director. And he has said, or written this in his study, Campi Flegrei is a super volcano, meaning a volcanic area where catastrophic eruptions have occurred. That, just to clarify, because I always receive comments, this is not a super volcano, and then some explanations. Yes, some opinions vary, but the guys that live there, that are right there, that are the ones that monitor this thing the most of everyone in the world, they say it is a super volcano, and that's why I will name it a super volcano. And this said super volcano is acting up, and there's a lot of new details that I want to talk to you about today. There's a new bulletin out, but also the Flegrei, how it was called, the rehearsal for evacuation of a volcanic eruption has just taken place a few days ago, and there is criticism from scientists and volcanologists about how it was conducted or what their expectations are, how this scenario would unfold in the case of a volcanic eruption. So scientists are saying that they're a little bit still not realistic about it, because this caldera volcano is way more dangerous than they anticipate, it seems. But there's more that I want to tell you. We will get back to drilling holes. And that is an interesting topic because it has been done in the past, but they want to do it again. So can that relieve pressure? Can that prevent this thing from exploding? Or will it cause this thing from exploding? Or will it give the Italians even access to rare earth, to rare minerals? So a lot to cover, so stay tuned. Eruptions have occurred at the supervolcano Campi Flegrei 39,000 and 15,000 years ago. Campi Flegrei is one of the most risky volcanic areas, and that's why I'm covering it so much, because it's also one of the mostly densely populated risky volcanic areas, with Naples that sits in between Vesuvius and Campi Flegrei with more than 3 million people. But also on the caldera, many people live right on top of Campi Flegrei. And how can that be? Because Campi Flegrei doesn't look like Vesuvius. That's a volcano that has a steep and high mountain. It's visible. You know it's a volcano, right? Basically, 3 million people live within 10 kilometers from a potential eruption event. And the caldera itself encloses a large part of the city of Naples. It's right underneath. And this area is experiencing unrest episodes, and we're in one currently that has started back in 2005 already. So that involves a large ground uplift, the bradyseism that is currently happening, intense, shallow, micro seismic activity. We've been having this all the time with magnitudes over 4. So this caldera has been formed by collapsing events. And why is this a supervolcano, and why is this so dangerous? Extremely explosive volcanic eruptions can happen from these large calderas, and they are the most likely hazard to generate global catastrophes. You hear me right, global catastrophes. If Campi Flegrei has a supervolcanic eruption, this will affect the whole world. So volcanic calderas like Campi Flegrei, they result from the rapid magma withdrawal associated with the collapse of a roof of a magma chamber. There was magma in the magma chamber, but then the magma went out into an eruption, and then you have that hollow space underground that collapses. The larger the magma volume, the larger the collapse of that magma chamber once it's empty and not being refilled. Although these supervolcanic eruptions are very rare, such super eruptions represent a serious threat to mankind. But even moderate to small eruptions from such calderas like Campi Flegrei also represent a major risk as well, particularly when it's in urban areas like Campi Flegrei. So Campi Flegrei, it's located in southern Italy. It's a typical example of a collapsed caldera, which has a surface that is partially, in the case of Campi Flegrei, 60% submerged, and you don't even realize it. And it goes into the Gulf of Pozzuoli. It's even underwater. So at Campi Flegrei, the largest caldera forming eruption that occurred was about 39,000 years ago. That's when gray tuff basically covered the whole Campania region. That's where Naples, Pozzuoli, and Campi Flegrei is located. Basically was covered with large flow deposits from that eruption. And then they did trace back associated fine ash particles as far as Moscow. And that's why we're saying global impact. And then the most recent caldera forming eruption that was 15,000 years ago, they called it, produced a yellow tuff deposited over the larger Naples region, and more than 60 smaller hydromagmatically eruptions have modified this area until the present time. So the densely populated area of Naples is exposed to a significant risk because Campi Flegrei has this history of massive volcanic eruptions and ongoing deformation. That's why it was so important that they finally acknowledged the fact that there is a current risk that Campi Flegrei might see an eruption. So previously, in the previous months, they only talked about the earthquake risks, but scientists have warned them. They said you have to prepare for the worst. So they did this evacuation exercise that was called Phlegraean. If you want to learn more about this, I have made videos about this where you see all the evacuation maps and how they thought that this would work. So they're happy that about 1,500 people were taking place. They said that they would have also been able to conduct this without any residents participating, because basically what they were trying to do is test if the civil defense and if all the personnel that they need for this evacuation find the right spots at the right time, whether this setup is working smoothly, because the evacuation plan is based on blocking certain roads and opening certain access roads to certain access points. That's the yellow stars here in that picture, to the Via Tangenziale, which is basically a major highway that would lead people out of the affected area, or to one spot at the water to get them out by boat. Of course, this is compromised if the eruption is in the water, sending a large tsunami towards the coast. You can't evacuate like in the port and bring people to Sicily. That's their plan. The same thing is if this Tangenziale, this main road, is damaged by earthquakes. Just the recent large earthquakes had their epicenter right underneath. So they know they need to upgrade this road. If there's any bridges or tunnels or anything, that nothing collapses and breaks, because before we see the volcanic eruption, we will likely see a large earthquake swarm. So the last week, that's what the bulletin of the INGV is saying, the number of earthquakes has increased again, but that's not the only thing that has increased. The temperature of the fumaroles in the Solfatara, that's basically the most active caldera of Campi Flegrei right now, and there's several. The fumarole temperature has increased from 95 degrees Celsius to 96 degrees Celsius. So an increase, and that tells us something is heating it up. right? And they have confirmed just a few weeks ago that magma is rising to the surface and is now present at a shallow depth of only 3.9 kilometers. So that is heating up water and fluids and everything, so that these steam fumaroles that are coming out there are getting hotter now. And the residents are also saying that the smell of sulfur has increased. And that is also reflected in this graph that they have released with the bulletin. So they have first released also an update about the Brady seism. You see here the graphs of the land rise. We know it has doubled in April, and then basically by the end of August, it has gone back to lifting the land up 1 centimeter per month. And that's what you see at the end of these graphs. These blue lines, it shows what's the current status. And you see that some of the curves dipped a little bit. That was when it was reduced from 2 centimeters a month back to 1 centimeter a month. But now it's basically going with a steady rate again of 1 centimeter per month. And you can also see it a little bit more detailed on this graphic here that shows you the point when it was accelerating and now that it's coming back. So here in this graph, you can see the blue line. That's basically the temperature of these fumaroles. And you see it's rising up at the end now. And there's some dips where it was lower, but they think this was just related to an anomaly in measuring because it has been raining. And they're measuring at a distance of 5 meters from these fumaroles. So the rain and everything might have impacted the temperatures. But we see it's getting back up there. And also in this graph here, you see the measuring of the CO2. So that is going up as well right now. This shows with the Brady seism, with the earthquakes, with the hot fumaroles, this caldera is very active right now. And that's why active calderas are the major volcanic features of the Earth, because they're associated with large magma reservoirs. We know episodes of unrest, if we look at historical data, do not always have to result in an eruption. But on the other hand, if you turn it around, every eruption has a phase of unrest before it happens. So that's why, it's a 50-50 chance. And it's so dangerous because these explosive caldera forming eruptions are among the most catastrophic events that we can experience here on Earth, on the whole planet. These eruptions result from the withdrawal and collapse of these huge magma chambers that are underneath the Earth's crust. And then they produce large, very, very large volumes of pyroclastic deposits and later stage deformations and large pyroclastic deposits. So, okay, now we had the Campi Flegrei, this evacuation rehearsal, but is this realistic? Because it is based on a warning time of 72 hours. So the volcano would have to be very, very nice and wait 72 hours, basically from the first alarming earthquake swarm until eruption. And is that really the case? There's a geologist, Giovanni Mastro Lorenzo. You've probably heard me quote him quite a bit because he's been the one that's continuously warning. And he also said you need a new evacuation plan. So now they have a new evacuation plan. Is he satisfied with this new evacuation plan? Because in the past few months, he said you are not prepared. You need to adjust this and you need to prepare for the worst case. Not just for earthquakes and Brady seism. You need to be prepared for, a medium-sized eruption, but you also need to prepare for a super volcanic eruption, for the worst case scenario. And he just said, what Mastro Lorenzo says is we are not ready for a sudden evacuation with less time, right? He's a volcanologist. He's a senior researcher at the Vesuvius Observatory. So he's not some nobody. He really knows what he's talking about. And we know another scientist, Roberto Scandona, who said in March, before the above magnitude 4 earthquakes even started, I would evacuate now if I had the money, the funds. And he's a senior researcher for the Vesuvius Observatory for the INGV, has written many papers about Campi Flegrei. So he knows it's like his own pockets. So what Mastro Lorenzo said is, we don't know at what magnitude the buildings in the area will hold up. How long will they hold up, right? That's why the government is thinking about upgrading buildings along these major evacuation routes that they have determined now, that these buildings will not collapse and block these evacuation routes, because then it's complete chaos, because they're blocking off the other areas, because they want the people to be directed to these exit points or access points to this major highway. So Mastro Lorenzo said, let's say there's a magnitude 5 earthquake, the scenario could be very critical. And the problem is now it's a race against time, because with the current activity, we could see an imminent eruption. We could also not. But if that eruption happened right now, they're not prepared. He refers to the earthquake that happened in May. There was an earthquake swarm 4.4, and there were already like larger damages at homes in Pozzuoli, like these old stone homes. So that's why he says the 4.4 earthquake is the strongest ever recorded in the Campi Flegrei area since they started measuring earthquakes in this area. And that's why he says, I don't think we could be ready to face a seismic or a volcanic escalation, because he says we don't even know how long these buildings will be able to withstand these earthquakes, because one earthquake after the other, how long will they withstand that shaking, not only the magnitude but also the length of the shaking and the repeated shaking of a large earthquake swarm that could be a signal that an eruption is coming. So that's why he has been questioning for a while. Not only questioning, he's publicly raised doubts in recent years and just currently about the countermeasures that the public institutions have initiated against this volcanic activity, the Brady seism, to prevent damage. Because definitely since this May 20th event with the 4.4 earthquake, where people were running out on the streets, it's definitely that the population that lives right on top of Campi Flegrei has been living in fear since that afternoon. Because with the magnitude 4.4 earthquake came over 160 other tremors. So thousands of citizens ran out on the streets, were sleeping in their cars and stuff like that. Mastro Lorenzo has explained the current situation, so what is happening at the moment. He says it's not a surprise for professionals. It is a Brady seism, and that comes with certain things. So the ground deformation, the stressing of the rocks. If the ground is rising, these rocks are getting brittle. And the faults are activating, the faults that are in this area. And that's why earthquakes are being generated. But he also stresses the 4.2 that we had last year in December. He says, if it comes to strength, the step from 4.2 to 4.4 is significant. So it's not like, yeah, that's almost the same. No, this is really, really a significant increase. Each additional point in magnitude releases about 32 times more energy. So let's talk about this magnitude difference a little bit more, because I think this is really, really important if we evaluate what is going on at Campi Flegrei. So when we talk about earthquake magnitudes, even small differences in numbers can mean really big differences in energy that is being released from these earthquakes. So let's have a look at 4.2 versus 4.4, like Mastro Lorenzo has pointed out. So the difference in magnitude for us might seem tiny, so we might not, yeah, it's basically the same. No, it is significant, as he says, because that scale of difference is logarithmic. So it's accelerating. Logarithm, that was what everyone hated in math class, right, guys? Maybe you remember. So it means when we go from 4.2 to 4.4, the 4.4 earthquake releases about twice as much energy as the 4.2. So what looks like a small difference is actually very significant when it comes to determining the force of an earthquake and the effects of this earthquake on structures. And now let's, for example, say if you compare earthquakes that are 2 full points apart, like from 4 to a 6 potentially, the energy difference is about 1,000 times. So a magnitude 6 is 1,000 times more powerful than a magnitude 4. Basically, you could make a comparison. You could compare a large firecracker with a huge bomb. So that's the difference. So was that reaction that the people had when the 4.4 was hitting their homes was like fleeing from their homes an exaggerated reaction? According to Mastro Lorenzo, no, it was not at all. Because he says the people are right to flee their homes because most of the buildings in Pozzuoli and Bagnoli are not earthquake resistant. They have already endured thousands of tremors. That has probably done some damage. And he says we don't know what their breaking point is before they collapse. So people are now living back. They're back, living in their homes. And he stresses, he says, the risk is real. And for this reason, the institutions should immediately find alternative housing for those residents that do not want to return to their homes. But is there really a large number? So far, it doesn't really look like this. He maybe should word it like for people that really should leave these damaged homes. Maybe the government should pay them out like they did in Iceland and Grindavik, because it's a poor area. People can't just afford leaving everything behind that they own. And he's right. He says the damage has already occurred to the structures, and some buildings have been evacuated, although they're right now only dealing with modest magnitudes. And why is this happening? He says this is happening because the epicenter of these volcanic events, of these seismic events, is shallow. And so is the magma chamber. Now, we cannot rule out that there might be larger earthquakes. He has said back in May, get ready, we could see a 5-point something very soon. So this cannot be ruled out, but it also cannot be predicted. So it's an unknown thing. But what he says, what we do know is that reaching a magnitude of 5 would represent a very critical scenario for the condition of the buildings. And that's why in recent weeks after this big shaking, the citizen committees have also raised the question whether it makes sense to continue with the reconstruction of Bagnoli that was in the red zone that has seen quite a bit of damage through these earthquakes. Because it is dangerous there, very dangerous. And that's why Mastro Lorenzo says building in these areas should now completely be prohibited. The problem right now is with these evacuation plans and with the general perception of everything, it is like for non-experts that are not scientists in this area, it's a little bit difficult to distinguish between bradyseism and the volcanic risk, because bradyseism, that comes with the land rise and with the earthquakes, but the volcanic risk, that's a full-blown eruption. What Mastro Lorenzo is basically saying, yes, you have to be aware that we cannot predict earthquakes or volcanic eruptions. Especially we cannot say in 3 months and 3 days and 5 hours we will have an earthquake or an eruption. That's not possible. But they can give indications with if there's a lot of land rise, earthquakes, temperature of the fumaroli is rising, right? If you've watched my channel, what's going on in Iceland with an eruption every 1 or 2 months, there are signs when they can say we might see something in the next 3 weeks, then it increases. Yeah, now it might be a few days. So, but with Campi Flegrei, that is not erupting on a regular basis. Thankfully, it's a little harder. With that in mind, that is really, really hard to tell. He says we can say that the current episodes that we're seeing in Campi Flegrei could definitely prelude to a volcanic phenomenon, meaning eruption. But he says the seismic risks and the volcanic risks are tackled differently. What they have to do is earthquakes require a seismic adaptation of buildings, that's for sure. But for a volcanic risk, that doesn't help you. You cannot remain in your building. So for volcanic risk, he says it is crucial that you have an adequate evacuation plan. And that's what he has been criticizing continuously. So he says the current plans do not guarantee citizens' safety because they are based on optimistic projections, which is not good. Like you have 72 hours. So that's why he say the plans should not rely on scientific models, because the history is telling them that these models only have been accurate in about 20%, and that's not a lot, right? So they have been wrong in 80% of the cases, and he knows it because he's the scientist. So that's why you cannot rely, oh yeah, we think we have 72 hours. He says we need plans that are capable of evacuating the largest number of people possible to at least 20 kilometers away from the danger zone in the shortest possible time, even during an eruption. And that's what I wonder if I look at the current evacuation plan. Right now, the buildings are not all seismically upgraded yet, and it remains in question if the upgrades then will hold. So if these access routes that they want to have through Naples, a city with narrow roads. One of my viewers was there recently, and basically he wrote in the comments, he said, you know what? There's no way out. The roads are winding and very, very narrow. So you have to overcome this. That's why in an ideal world, if you have 72 hours, the civil defense blocks off the road system so that people know where their access roads to the tangentiale are, and then in the chaos they will find these roads. Let's say the eruption happens, it's dust, it's volcanic particles, it's fear, it's panic. Will the civil defense people hold their post, or will they run away? And then if only one building collapses on one of these roads, where do people go? And you have to have that in your head. This is not like an American city which is, you know, like avenues go this way and streets go this way, and it's a grid of horizontal and vertical roads. No, it's completely chaotic. So that's why. But you know, how do you want to solve this? I don't think it's solvable. In my opinion, the only solution is you would have to move everyone out, starting to move to abandon this area already. But is that feasible? I mean, where do you start? Where does it end? Should we evacuate the whole West Coast, like Vancouver, where I am sitting right now, Portland, Seattle, all these areas, because they could see the 9.0, the big one that would definitely cause devastation. Of course, you know, if you compare the big one here with what would happen if you're in the red zone of Campi Flegrei and that thing has a super volcanic eruption, the chances of survival are better on the West Coast with the big one, because with that explosive imminent volcanic eruption, it's over, right? So that's why scientists around the world have tried to find answers, or more answers, what is really happening underneath Naples, underneath Campi Flegrei? Let's find out more. They have started a drilling program to drill and see what's going on. How are the layers of the rocks situated? How brittle are they? So then that was abandoned. But the talks were always that they want to restart this. But then there were the fears, well, by drilling holes, will you give a way for the magma to come up? Will this cause an eruption or problems? There's another scientist, his name is Robert Botnar. He's a professor in earth sciences, and he works for the department of the Virginia Polytechnic Institute. And he is pro drilling. He thinks that drilling into Campi Flegrei could potentially relieve pressure of the hydrothermal system that is basically expanding right now and causing this land rise. Because if water gets heated up and it starts boiling, it expands. So all this water, if the crust, the caprock layer is getting quite brittle from all this expansion, the water can infiltrate it, and then it expands and it lifts everything up. In addition to that magma chamber that is filling up with magma and heating up everything. So he has also looked at the recent events of Campi Flegrei, including the Flegrei, and he would like to carry out multiple drillings as deep as 3 kilometers. So we know they kind of confirmed the magma chamber at a depth of 3.9 so far. And that drilling, this is what he says, would be basically the same what you do if you want to build a geothermal power plant. That's what they have in Iceland, in Svartsengi. And there are other boreholes that can measure the pressure and can give indications for a volcanic eruption. So is that really that dangerous? Because geothermal power plants, like they are in Iceland, they're using them in areas where there is volcanic activity. So he thinks, drill into this hydrothermal system, drill into that bradyseism, could reduce the ground uplift. Basically could relieve stress for that area. And if there's less ground uplift, there's less pressure on the crust, there's less fracturing, and there would be less earthquakes. But, here comes the but. This is okay if this land rise is only caused by hydrothermal effects, water, fluids, and not by the actual magma that is filling up. So it's a little bit of both, but what we have learned in recent weeks, that it's definitely the magma right now that is coming up and that is causing this. And there are the risks, right? Do you want to drill into the magma chamber? So that's why there are a lot of critical voices right now that are not happy with this, and they're warning. They said if you do that, you could see an unpredictable outcome or bad environmental effects, especially since you see where this is located. It's right by the water. It's right where the Gulf of Pozzuoli is located. So because if they're drilling, fluids will come out, gases will come out, whatever will come out, hopefully not magma. So where would you put this? It's running off, and it's running where? It's running into the sea. And as this is coming from deep down in the earth, there could be harmful particles, toxic substances coming out with it. And then it's you know, this is not clear spring water or anything like this. This is really, really muddy. I mean, you already see it at the Solfatara. There's mud pools and there's fumaroles. It's messy. So while we have the skeptics on the one side, the scientist, Robert Botnar, he says, well, that could also be cool, potentially, what's coming out of these boreholes, because he suspects we could maybe see raw minerals, raw materials that are very valuable, such as lithium, for example, right? That is high in demand, like for all these electric car batteries, and the mining of lithium is very much in the critics because how it's done, it pollutes a lot of water and it contaminates the environment. What he would do if he did it, he would do at least 10 boreholes, and even some of them in the water, like offshore. And he's been proposing this for quite a while. So I've reported about this in the past. So it's been going on for years that he wants to do this, but it keeps being rejected and rejected and rejected. So I don't know, I think they need to learn more about this if they decide not to move everyone away, which is pretty obvious that this is the decision. And people are also not moving voluntarily. They tried this with Vesuvius, with the red zone around Vesuvius, which they would have the same fate as Pompeii. But people are not moving. They offered 30,000 euros. There were not many takers. So people will stay, and many said, we will stay. We're Italians, we have family ties everywhere. We either leave altogether or nobody leaves. So reality is nobody leaves, right? Or not many people will leave. And since we're speaking about Vesuvius, here's the latest list of the earthquakes above magnitude 1 that are happening in this area. And we know Naples is between Campi Flegrei and Vesuvius, and kind of like it looks like Vesuvius and Campi Flegrei are playing earthquake tennis. So it's like, oh, Vesuvius, I'm having 2, then Campi Flegrei has 2, then Vesuvius has 2, then Campi Flegrei has 2. So we will have to see. So guys, this was a longer one, but I think it was important to know about what's really going on in Italy right now. So thanks for watching. If you're new here, please subscribe. Then we'll see how that goes. I hope to see you there, guys. If you want to support the channel, check the links in the description. Thanks for your support, guys. You're absolutely awesome. And I'll also see you very soon in the membership area. I have some new stuff. I saw someone really strange today and I filmed it, so I will upload this for my members shortly, and then let's discuss this, what you think. It was hilarious. See you there, guys. Stay safe. Bye bye.